Team Invest Private. He's taking all of your calls. 1300 30 34 35 is the number to call. And you can email us at yourcall@yourmoney.com.au. Now, I think we've got an email. No, I'm being told that our guest is ready. In fact, we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk election, in particular taxation, as Labour vows to end tax deduction for accountancy fees. And the opposition leader said this morning that deducting fees is the rort we have to shut down.
What we choose to do is spend scarce and important taxpayer money on educating the kids, on decreasing the out-of-pocket costs of, cancer treatment, rather than spend it on tax loopholes like deductions to account dollars or property subsidies.
Is a deduction for $1 million.
Now, for industry reaction and what this actually might mean for your money, we're joined by Michael Croker from Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand, who joins us live from our Perth studio. Michael, thanks very much for chatting with us. This is not news that you welcome, is it? First of all, why is there a deduction for accountancy fees?
It's a long-standing deduction in the income tax law, which is more accurately called the cost of managing your tax affairs. And it reflects the fact that in calculating your taxable income, if you need the help of an experienced professional, you should get some tax relief for those professional fees that you pay.
Mm-hmm. So what is your reaction then, and what is the wider industry reaction to this particular announcement from the opposition leader?
Well, leaving aside today's statement by Mr Shorten, the policy has been published for a while now. The proposal is that individuals are capped out at the tax deduction they can claim at $3,000. We're hoping that it doesn't extend to business taxpayers, because that would be a huge burden. But even for individuals, Mr Shorten fails to acknowledge that around 75% of Australians use the services of tax agents, many of whom are accountants, in preparing their annual income tax return. And in the case of businesses, the figure rises to something around 95, 96%. Now, if you join the dots here, and this is not really acknowledged by Mr Shorten today, you make the tax law very complicated. You empower the ATO with almost police-like powers to enforce that complex legislation, and a very active audit and compliance campaign, as the ATO rightly does. And then you say, oh yes, but when you need to hire someone to be in your corner during all of these investigations and ATO reviews and all the compliance obligations, we're going to cap the deduction at $3,000. It doesn't make very much sense, especially coming from a party that says, we're the party for the fair go. Our industry is very annoyed by it.
Michael, the absurdity is it sounds a bit like if we extend it beyond tax, beyond getting tax advice. How would Mr Shorten feel if somebody came up with the idea that if you need electrical wiring fixed in your house, you weren't allowed to charge, or in your business, you weren't allowed to charge the cost of that to your business if it was in your business, but you'd instead get up there and instead of getting a licensed electrician who's the member of a union, you fix the wires yourself, thereby risking people getting killed. I mean, it's an absurdity that something that you spend on, you can't get a tax deduction for spending on that. If you're getting advice because you can't do it yourself. I'm not an accountant. I couldn't do my own tax return. And my tax affairs are fairly complicated, as are most people's, because of the law. Now, if you only have a very, very simple job and you're paying PAYG, maybe you don't need a tax consultant or somebody giving you tax advice. But if your affairs are a little bit more complex because you actually saved for your own retirement instead of deciding to be on the pension, you need advice. The other thing, by the way, he's talking about spending it on hospitals and so on, all very noble. The biggest single budget expenditure is pensions. So if you're going to drive lots more people onto being on a pension, the expenditure is going to go up, and there'll be less money for hospitals if they're not getting tax advice.
I can only imagine that this might actually be a major headache for the ATO as well.
Oh, exactly. And we've got many great chartered accountants working in the ATO and in Treasury. And Mr Shorten's comments today are particularly disappointing because he seemed to imply that Treasury are, you know, sort of the puppets of the government of the day and don't exercise any independent, fearless sort of decision-making. And there's a dog whistle against the ATO as well. The suggestion that accountants are somehow riding roughshod across the tax system, ripping off the community, it's really a dog whistle suggesting or implying that the ATO is somehow bereft of talent. That's not the case at all. There's very fine ATO officers out and about enforcing the tax law in the manner that... And so it's a really quite curious display early on in the election to sort of bag an entire profession in a way which we find quite divisive and unfair and wildly inaccurate for the many Australians who use the services of an accountant.
Michael, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for sharing your insight. Michael Crocker from Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand there, joining us live from our Perth studio. Now.